Before I get started, I wanted to give whoever's listening a little bit of insight on what this podcast is about. Almost everyone has gone through a breakup of some sort, whether that be a breakup with an ex-partner or an ex-friend. Breakups are obviously devastating and hard, but they shape us into the people that we are today. My hope for this podcast is to make you realize that you aren't alone when it comes to going through a breakup. You can get through it, and hopefully learn something from it at the end of the day. This is Obliterate Podcast. I'm your host, Christine Nikolic. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, or feelings about me, my guest, or just the podcast in general, feel free to email me at obliteratepodcast@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at obliteratepodcast. My guest today is Lorrine. She's a writer, a mom, and a grandma living in San Francisco. In this episode, Lorrine talks about her past marriages, her experience dealing with toxic relationships, and how she learned to finally love herself and meet the love of her life. This is Lorrine and the ex-husband. How are you doing, Lorrine?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. So yeah, I don't know much about you. Please give me what you do for a living, where you're from, and all that stuff.
Yes, I am a facilities manager. So I manage facilities for a living. I'm in California, and I'm the mother of 4 boys, 3 bonus children, and 3 grandchildren.
Awesome. So are you from California originally, or did you move there?
I was born in Guam, and I was raised in Hawaii. And I moved to California at the age of 15.
Okay. That's cool. What was it like living in Guam and Hawaii? Were you like old enough to remember it?
Guam, I was 3 months old when my parents moved to Hawaii, so I only remember Hawaii. And growing up in Hawaii is amazing. I actually am trying to retire back over there. I'm trying to go back.
I've never been.
It's amazing.
What part are you from?
Oahu, the main island, yeah.
It sounds like a good place to end up in the long term.
Mm-hmm. It's expensive. It's very touristy, but I'm not the type of person to get the island fever. A lot of people say you get island fever because you can't go anywhere. It's an island. But I love that type of island life, so I'm totally fine with it.
So where in California are you now?
San Francisco area, Bay Area.
Oh, nice. So what's behind you? Are you an author?
Yes. So I wrote my first book called Freeing Your Heart for Love. I had talked about writing this book for over a decade with my friends, and it was just a joke because everybody loved my experiences. They would all be fascinated by me and tell me, oh, you should write a book or you should do a movie about your life, because I've had a very colorful life. It's been very hard to get to where I am today, but I am very thankful that I had those experiences because now I'm able to write a book about it. I'm almost done. Well, I finished my manuscript in December of last year, but how I came to writing the book was in April of last year, I joined this virtual writing workshop for fun. And it was just to do it for fun, do some creative writing. I was like, oh, I'm just going to have this for fun. And then I just started doing the writing prompts and I started crying, and I was writing about my past experiences and I don't know what was coming over me. And so what I did was just something told me, now's the time to write your book. So I just opened my computer and just started typing away, and I knew nothing about how to write a book. I don't even read books. So I was like, how am I possibly going to write a book? So I just dove into writing challenges with Hay House. I joined the community with Hay House. I just started following other authors and basically taught myself how to write a book. And so I started really writing in July of last year and I finished in December. So now I'm done with layout. I did my book cover and now I'm going to print my book in March and it's releasing in April.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I feel like that's such a quick turnaround too. I've heard that it takes years for people to write books.
Yes, it does take years, and I just powered through it. I knew in my mind what I wanted to write. So basically my book is written in 4 parts. It's a memoir. And I knew that I wanted to write about my 3 failed marriages, ultimately finding the love of my life. I'm married now, 4th time. I'm not ashamed to say it now. I was for a long time. And my transformation of my life from abuse to actualization and healing. And so that's basically what my book is about. Yeah, I'm really proud of my book.
You should be. That's amazing. And you said it's gonna be released in April.
April of this year. Yes.
Where are people gonna be able to find it?
freeingyourheartforlove.com. And then once it releases, I'm going to launch a Kindle and Amazon. It'll be everywhere to order. And I'm launching it on my husband's birthday because this book is really dedicated to him because I know like your show's about relationships, and I I really like had to learn to love myself before I met my husband now, because I went through a lot of bad relationships in my life.
Well, congratulations again for accomplishing this amazing thing and writing a book. And I mean, that's a lot of people dream of doing that and aren't able to. So the
Yeah.
fact that you've done it in like 6 months is incredible.
Yeah, and I sold my car to for the expenses, because writing a book, I didn't realize how expensive it is to write a book. It's very expensive to launch a book. And so I felt really good about it, and I sold my car. I was like, we don't need 2 cars. I'll just sell my car. Cuz you have to pay for editing, you have to start marketing your book, you have to pay for the book cover, and cuz I had people help me with all this. I couldn't design it myself.
Are you
So,
comfortable talking about like the expenses that go into a book?
yeah, so expenses that go in, I've probably put in over $10,000 of my own money to try to get this book going, because you also need a website. You got to get your ISBN number, which is that barcode on the back of the book that I never knew what that was, but everybody has to get an ISBN number for each book you write. You also have to file with the Library of Congress, which costs money. Then you have to get your publisher, and then you have to print your book, and then you have to do layout. So layout is the interior of the book. So that costs money. And then you have to get a proofreader to read the
Oh my
final book.
gosh.
I mean, there's so many things. And I'm actually going to become a book coach. I just joined a book coaching certification program because I feel like here was me, little old me, knew nothing about how to write a book, and I wrote a book. And so I feel like I can help people who want to get their story out. So I joined a book coaching program to try to be a book coach in 8 months.
That's super smart. So who are you talking about today?
I want to talk about I've went through a lot of bad relationships, but I think the 3rd marriage was my rock bottom relationship. And I think I want to talk about that one because that is the story. This relationship is the one that broke me and what really truly woke me up to discover myself. But I was that's the age of 42. So just to talk a little bit about the relationship, I met him in 2010, and he was actually the older brother of my first boyfriend from high school.
Oh,
So we were friends already, but Facebook reconnects people, and we reconnected on Facebook. And I was like, oh, I already know him. He's part of the family. Let's just go out for coffee. So we went out for coffee. Ended up, coffee turned into a date. And I kept asking him, are you sure you want to do this? Are you okay with how I was with your brother? And he was like, yeah, fine. I was like, okay. So we went out, and our relationship fast tracked. Like, it went from like 0 to 60, really quickly. And I was spending the night at his house every night. After a couple months, I eventually moved in, and that's when the problem started. So I was very independent when I met him because I already had been through a second marriage that didn't work. So I was trying to build my independence. And when I moved, when I was staying with him, his ex-wife at the time was causing a lot of problems for us. And she just made our lives hell. She didn't want me around. She did everything in her power to make us fight. And they had this side thing going on. And so all of this I knew, but I kept ignoring it because I was the type of person to ignore the red flags because I wanted this relationship to work. So I ignored all of it. I ignored his anger issues, his depression. He would go through happy moments and then be sad, and communication would go down and communication would come back. And this was all before I married him, and I even broke up with him a few times before I married him. But he was a sweet talker, and I was lonely and I was sad, and so I always came back. And so when I came back, I married him. And it wasn't even a romantic proposal. It was just one day we were sitting on the couch and I said, "Oh, so if something happens to me, can you take care of my affairs, like my bank account, all that?" He's like, "Well, why don't we just get married with no ring?" And I was like, flattered. I don't know why. I'm like, "Oh, okay, sure. Let's get married." And so we got married, because what it turned into was it was a competition thing with his ex-wife for me. And I was saying, I'm going to win this guy. I'm going to win him. And getting married to him was the ultimate win. And he didn't even tell her that we got married. Like, we didn't even tell our kids. It was such a secret thing. It was really weird. And so we got married. And after we got married, I found out he had this illicit fantasy. And the fantasy actually has a name. I had to look it up while I was writing my book. But I thought I was being sex trafficked by him, but I wasn't. It was called cuckolding. So I don't know if you've heard of cuckolding.
It sounds familiar, but please describe it.
So cuckolding is when your husband wants you to make love to men in front of him. And I didn't know he had this fantasy until after we married. And so I thought in my head, when he talked about it, that we're just going to do it one time. We're going to do it one time, and then that's going to satisfy that need. Well, he wanted to do it again, and then again, and then again. And he was searching for these guys. He would send me their pictures while I was at work. And I was being shoved into a corner, basically, because I felt like I couldn't say anything, because number one, it would piss him off. And number two, I didn't want to lose him, because I had fought so hard to keep him that I'm like, okay, well, I better do this for him. But each time I had these encounters with other men and him, my soul was being just stripped from me. Like I didn't have a soul anymore. And I just felt dirty and shameful. And, it was just, didn't feel good about it. But I couldn't say anything. So it just kept happening. I mean, random guys would show up to our house while I was in the shower. I thought I was getting a massage, and then I was being touched in places. And it was just, that was the normal behavior that was coming from him that was in our marriage now. And it was in the back of my head all the time that, why would you want to share me? Why would you're supposed to protect and love me. You're my husband. And it was just, then he wanted to start swinging, and he wanted to be swingers. And I'm like, no, all this has to stop. So one day while he was work, because I didn't have the courage to leave him, like just go tell him, because I knew that he would talk me out of it. I just left him a note and I left. And I went to move to a beach town where I could heal. And so that was my turning point. When I was 42, I just woke up and said, I can't do this anymore. And he was pissed. He called me up. That's when the texts were coming and the phone calls, and how could you just leave me like that? And, as I was telling him, I don't want to have sex with other men, and like, this just doesn't seem right. And, he was trying to like sweet talk me again, but I had already built up the strength away from him that I wasn't going to go back. That was a tough transformation, but I still didn't learn the lesson, because I was still getting involved with unavailable men. I had another relationship after him, where this guy was married, and he said, "Oh, I'm not happy with my wife, but I'm going to leave her." He never left her. So I was able to cut them off faster, because I started seeing the red flags. And so that was because I was working on myself. I started working on my self-love for myself. That's when I ultimately met my husband now, was after I started loving myself.
Wow. Well, that's an intense relationship, and I'm sorry that you went through that. That sounds just pretty traumatic.
Yeah, it was.
How long were you guys together, like from start to finish?
We were together off and on for, 2 years.
Okay.
We were only married for 6 months, because that cuckolding fantasy started, and I just couldn't do it. I mean, it literally stripped my soul. I had no soul, and I was slipping back. I had severe suicidal depression as a teenager, and I almost took my life in my 30s. So I felt myself going back to that place, and I promised myself I wasn't going to go back to that dark place. So I knew I had to get away from him. Like, this was my wake up call.
Do you feel like up until your current husband, you dated like unavailable people?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I had a few good ones in between, but they were few and far between, because I realized I was attracting how I felt about myself inside. I was not happy with myself, and I said a lot of negative things about myself, and I was attracting that type of man in my life. And I also didn't feel like I deserved it for some reason. I didn't deserve to be loved the way I needed to be loved. And so when I finally realized I do deserve love and I do deserve available man, that's when I met my husband in 2017.
What was your big realization? Like, did you have to take time for yourself? Like, what happened?
So when I left that third marriage, I moved to a small beach town. Like I said, I still got involved with one more married man. I've been in other affairs in my life that I'm not proud of, but it's the lessons I had to learn in life that you don't need to be with an unavailable man. But I kind of just worked on myself, getting therapy. I discovered spirituality. I was just going to anything and everything that would condition my mind to see the positive side of life instead of being so negative, because I was always in that victim mode. Like, why me? Why does this keep happening to me? Why do guys use me? It's like, well, I take responsibility for some of that because I was allowing it to happen. If you allow that to happen to you, of course it's going to happen to you. And that's all you're going to attract, because that is literally like all the guys that I was attracting were guys that just wanted sex. And I was so mad about it, but it's like, well, that's the kind of person I was. I was just giving guys sex, and we weren't even in relationships. So it's like, well, if you're doing this to yourself, then of course that's what you're going to attract.
But I mean, I don't think that's all your fault, though.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you can take some responsibility, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's not all your fault. I hope you know that.
Yeah. And it was all I knew too, because I wasn't raised in a loving environment. So I didn't really know how to be respected. I wasn't taught that as a child or even a teenager. I married my first husband at the age of 17. So I was young.
Did you have kids with your first husband?
Yes. First and second husband. I had 2 boys and 2 boys, and they're amazing boys. I had to learn how to be a mother at a young age, and sometimes I didn't want to be a mom because I just was so broken inside. But now my relationship with my kids, I'm a grandma. I have 3 grandkids, so it's just amazing. I mean, if I took my life in my 30s, I wouldn't even meet my grandkids today.
Was your third husband good with your kids?
No, a lot of my boyfriends that I was with, they looked at them as baggage. So, I'm here to tell women that if a guy tells you you have too much baggage, they're not the one for you. Because my husband now, he just accepts my boys for who they are and who I am, and treats them like they're his own kids. So there are men out there that will take you and all your baggage and your broken, everything that goes along with you, and they will love you unconditionally, because that is what my husband is. He loves me unconditionally. Even writing this book, I read every single part of this book to him. There were stuff in there that he doesn't even know about, and he still loves me.
He sounds like a wonderful man. So, were there any happy times with your third husband that you can think of? Like, what made you want to marry him and what made you stay with him for 2 years?
There were moments of happiness, mostly when it dealt with food. So we ate a lot of good food together, but it wasn't really happy. And I married him because it was that competition thing with his ex-wife. It's like, oh, I won. He wants to marry me. And it was this flattering thing, that, oh, he wants to marry me. Okay, let's just get married. And I, not only that, but I didn't feel like anybody would want me with my 4 children, because I was so used to hearing that from men in the dating scene, was that, you tell them you have 4 kids and been married 2 times and you don't hear from them again. So I was like, well, here's this guy that doesn't care about that. So I'm just going to marry him. So I settled.
Can you like talk a little bit more about the cuckolding? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
So, did you like when it happened the first time, were you ever able to like pick the men, or did you enjoy it at all, or was it more like a forceful thing?
I did not pick any of the men. He chose all of them. He would send me their pictures and ask me what I thought of them. But I found in his email, and I write it in my book. I found an email of what he was writing these men, and that just struck me to the core. It was just the most sexual email you can ever read, and it was shocking because it's like, wow, you're talking about your wife that way to other men. And I just did what he wanted me to do. I didn't want to do it. If he thought I was enjoying myself, he would get really upset and be like, "You look like you're enjoying yourself too much." And it was always this, I don't know, this like behavior of back and forth of, "Oh, I want you to do this, but then I don't want you to do this." And he was just like that. That was just his personality. And I just lived with it, because, like I said, I didn't want another failed marriage. I didn't even know their names. They would just show up and it was just happening. We would even go to hotel rooms because we didn't want our neighbors to know what was going on, so we would leave our house and he would have me dress up in, skirts and high heels and, because he wanted the men to be turned on as soon as they came into the room. And I would always have to drink alcohol. And I started becoming, in my head, I was changing my name. I was changing my identity. I was like, okay, this isn't Lauren. This is another person. And so I was becoming another person for him because I didn't want to be me.
It makes me sad that someone would do that to you, and I'm sorry that that happened. I feel like, I mean, every marriage is different, and if both parties are fine with swinging and doing all that stuff, like, cool, do you, but never force someone to do something that they're uncomfortable with. I'm just, yeah, I hope he, I hope he has something coming for him because that's off. He sounds like a terrible man.
Well, yeah, him and my first and third part of my book, both of those husbands passed away last year within 3 months of each other. So they're not even alive. They don't even know I'm writing a book. That's And I honestly feel like the universe knew that they weren't going to be around because that third husband would have for sure came after me. He would have picked up the book and said, "Oh, you're airing our dirty laundry." Like he's that kind of guy. And he would have came after me, tried to sue me, whatever. I didn't use his name in my book to protect his privacy, but he for sure had that personality to come after me in rage. And so I feel like the universe brought me to April of last year to write this book because I didn't know they were even sick. I lost touch of both of them. And so it was just interesting how they both passed away within 3 months of each other. It was while I was writing my book. It was really, really bizarre.
How did they die?
My first husband passed away from some stomach issue. He was in the Philippines. The third husband I found out from my sister, and it was really weird how I found out because my sister texted me. I didn't see the text till the next morning, and she said, "Hey, sis, sorry about your ex." And I'm like, "What is she talking about?" Because I don't talk to him. I lost touch with him a long time ago. And I said, "What are you talking about?" The next morning, and she said, "Oh, he passed away." And I'm like, "Okay." And then all of a sudden, I was getting these because we had mutual friends, and I was getting people like texting me and saying, "Oh, do you want to know what happened?" And I'm like, "No, I don't care." And I had to forgive him and my first husband. Like I had to forgive them. The only husband that's alive still is my second husband. And he wasn't a bad guy, but I was broken inside that I didn't know how to even be in a relationship that was a good one because I was so used to chaos and abuse that when I had a good person, I would just mess it up. The third husband, writing about those experiences with the other men, that was really hard. That I had to start meditating. I actually started meditating last year just to get through it because it messes you up. It took me back to that time in 2010, and it was just like, wow, I was back in that moment, but I wanted the reader to really read it and be there and see my transformation of how I got out of it. And if you are that person that's going through that you can get out of it. And so that's why I wanted to write about those experiences and put them in the book.
I mean, yeah, I feel like if you're writing a memoir, even like you need to include everything, including the
Mhm.
hard stuff. And I'm sure it was really tough
Yeah,
writing about that. I like can't even imagine,
it
but
is very tough. I had to get some wine
yeah.
to get through it, you know, just to relax my mind. I put on jazz music because jazz music always helped me. And I got through it because my number one thing was to inspire someone. I want to inspire someone who's out there not to wait until they're 42, right? Because I was 42.
I mean, I think a lot of people when they're dating, they date like the same person over and over again. And I don't know why that is exactly. I don't know if you have any like advice on that or like if you have any insight on that at all.
Yeah, I definitely know why. I mean, I definitely know for me, it was because of how I felt about myself. Because I didn't love and respect myself. Those are the guys that were I was attracting was guys that only wanted me for sexual experiences. Like that's all they wanted me for because that's how I was treating myself. I was treating myself as this object of desire for men, thinking that that's going to give me love. And once I took that out of my mind, those men dropped off. Like I wasn't attracting those men anymore. That's how I attracted my husband was because I started respecting myself. Like I would meet guys before my husband on Tinder because that's where we met on Tinder. And everybody told me, oh, Tinder's just for sex. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to weed them out. I had to weed out a lot of guys who were just solely there for sex.
So do you think people should just immediately say what they want, like in their profile or just like in the first message?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And you're going to run into people that say, oh, I want a committed relationship, but then they still want you for sex only. There are people like that too, because I ran into them. But you just have to like set your boundaries that what you're okay with and what you're not okay with. And if the guy says, oh, you know, I just, you know, I do want a committed relationship, but then all they want you for is just the other thing, then that guy's not for you, probably.
So what were the steps that you took to get out of the relationship with your third husband?
Well, I had to start looking for an apartment. So I knew I needed a plan because I was living with him. So I started looking for an apartment and I knew that I wanted to go live by the ocean because the ocean was always my happy place. So that's what I first started doing. And then I just started conditioning my mind to be strong because I was always the type of person to stay. And I knew that I couldn't just tell him, so I had to leave him a note while he was at work. And you know, I just created this plan to get away and then to work on myself after that so that I wouldn't go back. Cuz he even after he was trying to get me back. And it's like I don't want to go back to that because he wasn't going to change. He still wanted to do that whole cuckolding thing even while we were separated. It's like, "Oh, that guy reached out to me again. Do you want to do it again?" I'm like, "No." And I just got out. I filed for the divorce paperwork and I just filed and I did the filing to where he didn't have to sign because I knew that he didn't open his mail. So it just sat on top of his fish tank and he didn't open it and the divorce was final and he got mad at me about that, you know, like and I was like, "Well, what did you think I was going to do? Like stay married to you?" So I just, you know, built up the strength. I had to build strength and courage to be on my own and not be afraid.
Did you like pack all your stuff and leave or did you kind of leave without everything?
I didn't have a lot because I sold everything when I moved in with him. So I had nothing. I had no furniture. And so I was pre-packing like my stuff in boxes and hiding them like in the corner of the closet that I knew he wouldn't look at. And then when I knew I was going to move and had the keys, I called up my daughter-in-law and we just like threw all our stuff in the car. It was like stacked high and we just that's how I did it while he went to work and I just took off.
How does it feel knowing that you're never going to see him again?
When he passed away, I wasn't sad at all. But I knew I had to forgive him because when I was writing this book, it was bringing up all these bad memories and I was getting angry again. And, you know, I said it out loud. Um, Me and my husband, so his sister, who was my best friend from high school, she passed away too, like right after him. And his son, so his oldest son was always nice to me, and he texted me one day and said, "Hey, do you have any pictures of my dad? We're trying to gather pictures of my dad." And I was like, you know what? I feel like I should get back to this kid because, he was always nice to me. And I sent him a few pictures. I said, I just got rid of them all. I'm sorry. But he said, do you want to know where my dad was buried? And I said, not really. But he told me where his aunt was buried. And that was my best friend from high school. And so I went and it was a wall, one of the wall burial things. And I said bye to my best friend from high school. And he was right underneath it. And it was really weird. And I just said something out loud, and I just said, I forgive you. And that's it. I mean, I wasn't sad.
What was that talk like, the last talk that you had with him?
I don't remember. I don't even write about it in the book because I really don't remember what the talk was about. I think it was just a lot of yelling, and I went through some of my old emails because I was trying to bring back the memories of dates of what happened, and there were some pretty nasty emails in there, and I was like, wow, he was really mad at me. But yeah, I don't remember. I know that he was trying to get me back even after the divorce, even after the paperwork was final. He still wanted me back in his life, and I was like, this is just it's not going to work.
So, do you have any advice for people that are in these toxic relationships or that have been through the cuckolding style of a relationship, and like what they should do in order to get out of them, or just how to approach a relationship like this?
Yeah, I think my advice, just because I experienced it, is have respect for yourself. That's the number one thing and then figure out, what do you want? Like if you're okay with this, because there are some couples that are okay with it, and that's fine if that's your lifestyle. But if, because even women, even men, it happens to men. I was talking to a guy, and a man was being approached by a wife to do this threesome thing with her and her husband. And he was shocked. He's like, wow, it was happening to me. So it does happen to men and women, but it's like, just know what you're okay with. If you're not okay with it, then don't do it. So I think ultimately, don't sacrifice your happiness for someone else, because it doesn't work. I mean, I know that for sure. Like, you're responsible for your own happiness. And like, he would have never made me happy because I wasn't happy myself.
Going through this, and now that you're married again, did you kind of have like a lot of conversations before getting married to your husband now about like your preferences with like sex and like your preferences with just like life? Like, do you think having those conversations, even though you might not know what you're even trying to talk about, are important? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I didn't trust him. He followed all these bad relationships. He knew about them all. And he knew the kind of person I was, but he also knew that, he loved me and that he was accepting me for who I was. So because he had that accepting behavior towards me, it made it easier for me, but it took me a while to trust him. He said, I love you first. I didn't say I love you for 6 months because I told myself I'm not jumping back into another relationship again. And so I gave him a hard time. Like, he was the one my entire life that I didn't have to give a hard time to, but unfortunately he followed all the bad ones. So I think, when you find somebody that can be patient with you, he nurtured me through my insecurities, which is the difference with the past guys, is because guys would get mad at me for being insecure. And then it made me feel more insecure. And, he gave me all his passwords to his phone, his email, Facebook, whatever. He's like, whatever is going to make you feel secure, here you go. I have nothing to hide. And that's what helped me build that trust for him, because he was nurturing, he was understanding, he was patient, really, really patient with me. And now we've been together since 2017. I trust him 100%. I don't look at his phone. I don't look at his text messages. I used to watch guys unlock their phones so I could go in there and be some sleuth, I was like a cray girl. So it's like, I'm not crazy anymore. Like, I don't need to go check his email. I just go in there if I ordered something, because sometimes I order stuff with his email. But it's like, I don't have a reason to. And I think once you get to that point and you meet that person that can just be there for you and has your back 100%. He has my back 100%. I know that. Like, I cry when I look at him because I'm like, I really know what it's like to be loved by a man now. to be truly loved, because you can love somebody, but I think love is a word that people just throw around. And it's, even I did it. I threw it around. But do you truly love each other? Like, that's the question. And I can honestly say that we both truly love each other 100%.
Oh, well, that's amazing. And also you're not crazy. I feel like there's a reason why you feel the need to like look at someone's phone. Like with my current boyfriend, I've never felt the need to do that either. And I've done that with past relationships, and it's like you feel crazy, but
Yeah.
there's a reason why you're feeling that way.
And the guy makes me feel crazy too. He's like, well,
yeah.
You're the crazy one. You need to go see the therapist, not me.
Well, I'm so happy you're with someone that you trust and love and respect each other, and that's how it should be.
Yes. Thank you.
What did you learn from all of your past relationships? Like, what are the main things that you learned that you want to share to the Obliterate listeners?
I think I learned trust, communication, patience, and love. I think I learned all of that with those past relationships, is like what it's like to have all of those things in a relationship. Because you know how they talk about, oh, I wish I could clone this guy with this guy and make a guy, and it's like, no, you don't need to clone anybody. You can have it all in one. And my husband's not perfect. We still have our moments, but he's 95% there, and, he has everything that I want. It's just comes back to those boundaries, like, what are you okay with and what are you not okay with? I just learned that from an author, Nancy Levin, about boundaries. And it opened my eyes about, wow, boundaries are between you and you. And I had no boundaries. I just let people cross them all the time. But I think that's what I definitely learned, was how to have boundaries for myself. And it's not selfish either. And I don't care if people say I'm selfish. I'm not. I just respect myself and I know what I'm worth. And I think knowing your worth is another battle that a lot of people have struggles with.
I totally agree with that. What's your life like now, and like what are you looking forward to this year?
I love my life. It's the best. It's the happiest I've ever been. So I'll be 49 this year, and we are just, me and my husband, like, how a lot of people say, oh, COVID stuck me with this person. Like, I miss my husband when he leaves me. Like, we miss each other. We love being around each other. And, yeah, he gets on my nerves sometimes when he wants to watch, his shows like Survivor and all these shows that I just don't like. But, I just said, okay, that's his thing. I'm just going to go downstairs. But my life now is just getting this book out, and what's my life beyond the book? Because I still have my facility job, but I know that my passion really lies in inspiring people through my story. So I'm really kind of focusing on that and building my social media following, and just getting to know people. I go live every Wednesday on Instagram, and I just bring on different people to help them share their story.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining me, and I really appreciate you telling your story and being like candid and honest.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I think the main takeaway I'd like everyone to have from this episode with Lorrine is to make sure you have power in your relationship. If you're in a relationship where you feel powerless, nothing good can come from that feeling. You're in charge of your own happiness. And even if you're truly in love with your partner, if you feel like they are controlling you and aren't listening to your needs, it's probably time to let them go. I also wanted to mention that Lorrine is an author and recently released her book, Freeing Your Heart for Love. To learn more about Lorrine or to order her book, please visit her website, freeingyourheartforlove.com. Obliterate Podcast is produced by me, Christine Nikolic. Special thanks to Diala for providing the theme music. Please follow Obliterate Podcast on Instagram. And if you have any questions, feedback, or are interested in being a future guest, feel free to email me at obliteratepodcast@gmail.com. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share this podcast with your friends and family. And thanks so much for listening. My name's Christine Nikolic, and this is Obliterate Podcast.